Airlines around the world now inspecting engines on Boeing 737s after a deadly explosion on a Southwest flight over Philadelphia. That explosion blew out a window, killed a passenger. It's the first fatal U.S. airline accident in almost a decade. Right now, no cause has been ruled out, but the NTSB is looking into metal fatigue as part of the problem, perhaps. Charlie Pereira is former NTSB investigator, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for joining us. What'd you make of this accident?
Well, there have been a number of uncontained engine failures in the United States over the decades, and this is the latest in a string. It also happens to be the second in the past 20 months of a Boeing 737-700 operated by Southwest Airlines. And apparently, just like the one in 2016, a fan blade separated, and this time it actually caused a fatality, whereas the one in 2016, there were no injuries or fatalities.
What happened after the one in 2016? What did they do in terms of inspections?
The FAA came out with a notice of proposed rulemaking in August of 2017, proposing to require inspections of these fan blades, but they haven't taken action on it yet. The engine manufacturer, CFM, just last week issued a service bulletin recommending these inspections, but action had not been taken yet, so it just seems like things took too long to occur, unfortunately, with the loss of life.
And how often does that happen? You know, people right now are hanging on the words, recommendations made, actions hadn't taken place yet, and now look at what we have.
Well, in my personal opinion, I think it was way too long. If you've waited 20 months to take action and somebody dies as a result of that delay, I think it's inappropriate. Some would even say perhaps reckless and negligent. I guess on the part of Southwest for not having taken the inspection action earlier. If you have an investigative finding that you know the fan blade fractured and you know that inspections can detect that and prevent it from happening in your other fleet aircraft, then you should, from a safety and ethics standpoint, take action to do that inspection before it's required by the authorities and not just wait for the government to tell you that you need to do it.
You know, the thing that jumps out at me is that the airline itself didn't take action. I mean, why expose yourself to this kind of liability? What would prevent or cause an airline to pause in terms of taking this kind of action?
I don't want to speculate on their logic, but I'm a business owner myself, and I know typically business owners don't want to spend any money if they're not required to by the government. However, when you're operating in an environment where lives are that heavily at stake. It's not like a car you can't pull off to the side of the road, or a boat you pull back on the throttles and you just float until you get the thing figured out and fixed. As you can see from this accident, catastrophic things can happen really fast in an airplane. And I think in retrospect, Southwest is certainly going to wish that they had taken action earlier. They have announced today that they are going to be inspecting all of these engines within 30 days. Southwest announced that today. The FAA has estimated in their proposals that it's going to take 2 hours, 2 mechanics, 2 hours per engine to do the inspection. So it's certainly not an excessive burden. They estimated that it was going to cost $170 per airplane to do this. So I think the family that lost their mother would have appreciated that $170 inspection having been done on this engine.
Well, and in the meantime, we've got how many flights, how many planes up in the air right now as we speak?
There are thousands of 737s making flights per day. So.
Right. Do you have pause to fly 737 tonight?
No, in fact, the ironic thing is Southwest is my favorite airline. I like to fly them because of their attitude and the fact that they have a common aircraft type that minimizes their complications and redundancy in their operations. It's just sad that this happened to them. In general, they have a very good safety record, as you're aware. I just think they're going to really regret not having done these inspections sooner on this one.
I think you're right. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yep, thank you.
Great information. All right. Family, friends, and community leaders tonight mourning the death of the woman killed in that incident. Jennifer Reardon was a mother of 2 and a Wells Fargo bank executive. She was flying home from a business trip. Her loved ones described her as the bedrock of the family. Today, people are calling the pilot a hero for landing the plane safely without more loss of life or injuries. The calmness and level-headedness of Tammy Jo Schultz is obvious in air traffic control recordings from yesterday's disaster. She had extensive training. She was one of the Navy's first female fighter pilots. She was part of a squadron that helped train ship crews to respond to Soviet missile threats. That training surely played a role in how she reacts under pressure. Pay attention to her voice as she tries to figure out where she should land the plane after that engine exploded.
Southwest 1380 has an engine fire descending.
Southwest 1380, you're descending right now?
Yes, sir, we're single engine descending, have a fire number 1.
Hi, Southwest 1380, okay, where would you like to go to? What's the airport?
Give us a vector for your closest.
Okay.
Philadelphia.
We're flying 250.
Okay, heading 250. We're looking at Philly.
Then once she rerouted the plane to Philadelphia, she started communicating with air traffic control tower. Listen as she warns controllers that one of her passengers is hurt and describes what went wrong with that plane.
Okay, could you have the medical meet us there on the runway as well? We've got injured passengers.
Injured passengers, okay. And is your airplane physically on fire?
No, it's not on fire, but part of it's missing. They said there was a hole and someone went out.
WUSA 9 transportation reporter Pete Montine. He's also a pilot. Now, what kind of training do these guys have to know how to handle situations like this, Pete?
Well, Bruce, it's almost like having a doctor's level of training in flying some of these airplanes professionally. You have to have thousands and thousands of hours. The routing into becoming an airline pilot is not unlike being in the military. Everyone is sort of graded on a similar scale. You have to have a certain type of experience. You need to get trained in this certain type of airplane. So Tammy Jo Schultz and her first officer, we don't know his name, by the way, did a really commendable job, and there was more accolades that came out today.
Yeah, as part of that training, do they simulate accidents, situations like this, lose an engine? How do you bring it down?
As an airline pilot, you spend a few days every few months in these big full motion simulators. It's sort of a gauntlet, for lack of a better term. You spend all this time training for scenarios that you would never want to have happen in the airplane. So there's an instructor sitting in the back, and their job is to make your life miserable as a trainee, and you run through these scenarios point by point, checklists. It's very routinized. You have to get it right in the simulator before you go out to the line and actually fly the airplane.
What about the calmness in her voice? Can you be trained to stay cool and calm and collected, or is she just that way because of the extensive training she's had?
She's incredibly experienced, and you can hear it. You know, Tammy Jo Schultz had all of this experience in the Navy that you talked about. She has a ton of experience as a Southwest Airline captain. Her husband is also a Southwest Airline captain, so a family of flyers. They're no doubt talking about flying all the time. She does this and makes the routine look really easy. You know, it's not very difficult to fly the airplane straight and level, but airline pilots, professional pilots, earn their pay, and then some in this case, when things go wrong.
Hearing all kind of accolades tonight. She's been called a badass. She's been called a hero. She's been called a lot of things. Should the general public feel confident that the pilot flying his or her plane tonight, as they take off from National, BWI, and other places, that these pilots have the same kind of experience?
I have no doubt. These are professional pilots. They train for this all the time. They know what's going to go wrong. Sometimes they just don't know when it's going to go wrong. And so they know how to get out of the problems. They know how to fix the problem and work through it. And you heard that in the air traffic control audio. She's calmly trying to fix the problem. And one more point that I just want to make here. Tammy Jo Schultz had a crew of people behind her. The first officer and the flight attendants. She's sort of leading that crew and making sure that they get the airplane on the ground safely and to get it evacuated safely, and that's exactly what happened.
And some incredible passengers on that plane, trying to rescue the woman who was going out the window and that sort of thing. Pete, thanks a lot.
No problem, Bruce.
All right, man.